Hello guys, let's continue our discussion about functions from the previous video. So what we discussed in the previous video is that we had a new function that we define, and then we passed the arguments to it that was received over here, and we were able to print, and it worked fine. So I'm going to modify this code a little bit now that I will be using some variables over here, which will, let's say, again store the value of 56 itself, and then we can have another variable that kind of stores the value of 23. And instead of kind of passing 56 and 23 directly, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pass argument 1 and argument 2 to it. This is the only change that I'm going to bring in, and let's see if the output still remains the same. So yeah, it works fine, because the only thing we did is that instead of passing 56 and 23 directly, we used two variables, and then we use those variable names over here. So it's same as passing 56 and 23, and that was received here and kind of printed. Now the next change that I'm going to do is that once I receive that particular variable, so one more thing which you would have noticed is that when you're passing those variables here in line number 13, you're calling them as argument 1 and argument 2, and when you're receiving it over here, you're calling it as a variable and argument. So uh, it is not necessary that you use the same variable name as what is being used when being passed the value. So here, if it is argument 1 and argument 2, it does not necessarily mean that you have to use argument 1 and argument 2 itself over here. So that the name you provide here is kind of local to this particular function, so you can provide a different name. So that's one good thing to know. The next thing that I'm going to do is that, fine, we had two arguments, argument 1 and argument 2, that was passed over here, that was received, and then we printed. Now um, let me change the value. Okay, or for yeah, I have explained what I wanted to, so now I can change this name for a better understanding. So we can have argument 1 and argument 2. um, so the name doesn't matter much over here. So now what's going to happen is argument 1, let me change its value to something else. Let's say 40, and let me change this value to 22. Okay, that's all. Now what I'm going to do is compile this once again, and let's see what will be the output. Uh, so just before we do that, what let's do is print um, that we are in the main function, and argument 1 has a value so much, and a space, and argument 2 has a value of so much. That's all. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile once again, and let me execute. So what we're seeing here is that the function that we had defined, it received the arguments, and argument 1 was 56, argument 2 was 23. After that, what I did is that I changed the values of argument 1 and argument 2. I made it 40 and 22. And then after that function was executed, wherein the values of those arguments were modified, I printed again in line number 18 what the value of argument 1 and argument 2, and as you can see here, it still remains to be 56 and 23. So the 56 and 23, these two arguments were passed to this function, and inside this function the modification was made, but when you came back here and printed again, the value has not been modified. So now this is an expected behavior, so we need to know how C++ works here. So what's happening is that there is a concept of pass by value and pass by reference. So what we have done here is like a pass by value. What that means is we had two different variables, and that's what we passed as arguments to this particular function. So when we passed this argument 1 and argument 2, we didn't necessarily transfer these actual variables. A kind of copy was created over here. Like I said, this was specific to this particular function, or local to this particular function. So anything you do with these two arguments is kind of like not related to these two. It was just like a copy of that was taken over here, and then you did some operations. So whatever changes you do here does not affect these two variables that are there in the main, because what's received here is like a copy and it's not those original variables. So that's why even though you modified those values of those variables, it does not reflect here in the main. So what we need to do for this to be effective is that we need to receive these arguments by reference, and that's what we are going to do in this particular case, that we are going to receive them by reference. And let's execute it once again and see the results. So now if you see, since we received them by reference and not by value, the modifications done to those two variables, okay, argument 1 and argument 2, were actually reflecting in the main function. So I changed it to 40 and 22 here, and that is now reflecting when I access them in the main function, as you can see here, 40 and 22. So this is actually the kind of syntax or the ampersand character that you need to append or kind of before the variable name, that what it actually indicates is that you don't want to be receiving a copy, but you want to receive these original arguments as is. Okay, so when you use this kind of syntax, or when you use this ampersand symbol, it's like a pass by reference, and you kind of receive the original variable itself and not a copy. And then when you modify or do something to those original variables, then that whatever is done here is kind of reflecting to the original variables over here, and you can see that in the result. So this is a nice concept to know, the pass by value and pass by reference aspects. So yeah, that's all in this video. Let's meet in the next video.